What's the secret to the Nintendo Switch's success? Well, the answer might have been in plain sight this entire time. Stay tuned. Regardless of how you feel about the Switch, one clear fact remains. It's a successful system. It's actually on track to be Nintendo's best-selling console of all time. It's outsold literally everything except for the DS and the Wii, and given that the Switch still has several years left, it absolutely can beat both of them with time to spare. But the question then becomes, why? Why is the Switch so successful? If I were to ask you that question, what would you answer? Some people would say, oh, it's the concept. The fact that it's a portable and a home console all at the same time means it's super unique. Others would say it has to do with the marketing. The fact that the name clearly describes what it does, and that Nintendo went all out with the commercials. Still though, some would say it has to do with the third-party support, something the Wii U never had. We were getting games from studios other than Nintendo, and that helped give it a big library. And while all those reasons are great, it's not the main reason. No, in my opinion, the main reason has to do with the most obvious thing of all: first-party games. Wow, a system is successful because it has games on it? Sound the alarm, everybody. Aiden has figured out the cure for cancer. Okay, look, I know it sounds obvious on paper, but with Nintendo systems specifically, it's their first-party output that determines their success. The weird thing with Nintendo, though, is that they don't just work on one console, they work on two: the home and the portable console. This has been a trend throughout all of Nintendo's history. We have the Super Nintendo and the Game Boy, the N64 and the Game Boy Color, the GBA and the GameCube, the Wii, the DS, the Wii U, the 3DS. This trend has been going on for 20 plus years. And while this strategy has always worked, one key detriment is that it splits both Nintendo's time and resources. I would also argue it splits Nintendo's franchises. Have you always noticed that some Nintendo series tend to prefer the home or the portable? Pokemon, for instance, has always been on portable consoles, where the spin-offs seem to go to the home console. Donkey Kong, meanwhile, is always on the mainline system, but very rarely the portables. And even some franchises like Mario and Zelda, sure, they show up on both, but different types of games are split. So usually 2D on portable, 3D on home console. The reason I'm giving you this Nintendo history lesson is not to bore you to tears, but to tell you why I think the Switch is so successful. It doesn't suffer from this problem because the Switch is both the home and portable console. It's the first time since the NES where we're seeing Nintendo dedicate all their resources to one system, and we're seeing the fruits of that labor. In fact, I would even argue that the Switch has the most first-party series out of any Nintendo system. And that's kind of a big claim. Don't you have anything to back it up with? Don't you want to dig a little bit deeper? Well, luckily, I came prepared. And so, we're going to talk about the Smash Brothers test. Now, Smash Brothers has always been one of my favorite series. It represents the history of Nintendo. It also, though, flat out tells us what series Nintendo considers important. If a character from a franchise gets a spot in Smash Brothers, then that means Nintendo cares about them and wants to support that franchise in the future. So what I'm hypothesizing here with the Smash test is that if we can pick out a character on the Smash Ultimate roster and see if they actually have a game on the Nintendo Switch, then we can formulate a percentage of how many first-party franchises appear on the console. Hopefully that makes sense, but before we get into it, let's establish a couple of ground rules with the Smash Brothers test. Rule number 1, this is the big one, the obvious one. In order for a character to count, there has to be a new mainline entry for the Switch. Rule number 2, I am, however, allowing ports of previous mainline entries. The only caveat being is that that port has to come out for the Nintendo Switch, either physically or digitally. Rule number 3, no virtual console, no Switch Online. While having a back catalog is important, and I do appreciate older titles, that's not really proper representation of a series. Most players of a console are not going to go back and look at that back catalog unless Nintendo was releasing those ports. So that's why there's a difference there. Rule number 4, no spin-offs or side games. Sure, Pokken Tournament does feature Pokemon, but nobody in their right mind would consider it a mainline series game. So, no spin-offs here. And finally, Rule 5. The way I'm going to be determining franchises, and by extension, what characters belong to those franchises, is by using the official series list on the Smash Ultimate website. So this is direct from Nintendo. I'm not making up these franchises, they're telling you straight up. The only thing I'm going to add to it is 2 series, Dr. Mario and Luigi's Mansion. Both characters have been featured a ton in Smash games, and both series are vibrant enough that I feel like it should count, but those are the only additions that I'm making. Without any further ado though, let's go ahead and begin the test.
Ready? Go!
Let's begin with the obvious Nintendo franchises, starting off first with Mario. Well, we have Super Mario Odyssey, the 3D title, but we also have New Super Mario Bros. Deluxe, the 2D title. The same is true with Zelda. We have Breath of the Wild, the 3D entry, and then Link's Awakening, the 2D one. Notice how we're not splitting up 3D and 2D games. They're both coming onto the Switch. Next up is Kirby. Now Kirby in recent years has flip-flopped. The past couple of entries have actually been on portable systems, and before that it was home consoles, and they've just kind of gone back and forth. Luckily, the Switch has a new game with Kirby Star Allies. Moving on over to Pokemon, the big one. It's always been portable. Is it finally going to be on the Switch? Well, not only do you get Sword and Shield, but we also even have spin-offs like Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee and Legends Arceus, which could be the new mainline series. Who knows? Only time will tell on that one. I'm adding in Animal Crossing in the big boy franchises here, specifically just because of how well New Horizons sold. There's now an audience for Animal Crossing now, and that specifically has to do with having a new mainline game on the Switch. Finally, I'm going to be including some newer franchises in this category, like Splatoon, with Splatoon 2 obviously, and ARMS, with the first ARMS game, because I imagine Nintendo is going to continue to support these. It only makes sense for me. Well, that's it for the obvious series. Let's take a look at some lesser known Nintendo franchises, starting off first with Donkey Kong. Well, there aren't any new Donkey Kong games on Switch, but there is a port of Tropical Freeze, and if you recall, ports do indeed count. Luigi's Mansion. I added it to the list because Luigi's Mansion 3 has sold super well, so this is a series that Nintendo wants to support going forward, even if it's just because Luigi is a Mario character of all things. Next up, we have Pikmin with Pikmin 3 Deluxe, which is pretty cool. Yoshi with Yoshi's Crafted World, and Fire Emblem is obviously a big mention, just given how many characters are on the Smash Ultimate roster. Man, am I glad that we ended up getting 3 houses, because that checks off a ton of boxes. Really though, I think the biggest in this category, outside of Fire Emblem, would be Metroid. It's always been a pain in the ass to get any Metroid game on any system, so it's kind of insane that the Switch is going to be getting both Metroid Prime 4 and Metroid Dread, both a 2D and 3D Metroid. Very rarely does that ever happen, so kudos to the Switch for pulling that off. But as nice as first-party characters are, what about third parties? That's obviously a big factor of a system doing well, and would you look at that, the Switch has a ton of third-party support. Starting off first with Sonic the Hedgehog, we have Sonic Forces, the 3D title, as well as Sonic Mania. We have collections for franchises like Street Fighter and Castlevania. Final Fantasy has ports of 7, 8, 9, 10, and even 12, so a lot of titles there. And then we even have Xenoblade, with Xenoblade Chronicles 1 Remastered, and then 2, which ended up coming out on the Switch. We also have Mega Man 11, and how can you forget series like Minecraft, Dragon Quest, and this one's a bit of a weird one, but Fatal Fury. Now, the original Fatal Fury series is all but pretty much dead. The only remnant surviving is Terry himself, and he shows up most often in King of Fighters games. Luckily for the Switch, they have both King of Fighters entries and Fatal Fury ones, although no new titles, obviously, but I'm going to count it for this one. Sure, the Smash Bros. Test does reveal some gaping holes in the Switch's lineup. Obviously, there are franchises that currently aren't represented here. One of the biggest ones for me is Star Fox, so Fox, Falco, and Wolf unfortunately have nothing. F-Zero is a fan favorite, Granted, we haven't gotten a game since the GameCube, but I would love to see a new one. Dr. Mario you might not consider to be an official Nintendo series, but they continue to release new games for the Wii U, the 3DS, and even mobile devices. Really though, the biggest of all of what's missing is for sure the Mother series. There are 3 games total. We have Earthbound Beginnings, which ended up just being on the Wii U Virtual Console of all things. Then we have Earthbound, the Super Nintendo title, which was also on the Wii U, and then Mother 3. Mother 3 was only released in Japan, only on the Game Boy Advance, and has not been available anywhere digitally since that point. So, given that there's so few games and have very few re-releases outside of their original consoles, if we get a Mother game on the Switch, that's how we know we've officially hit it big. So, be on the lookout for that. I'm pulling for you, Ness. You'll get a game eventually. Of course, there are also some third-party entries, like Persona or Tekken, but those mainly come down to the publisher, and whether or not they decide to put those games on the Switch is more up to them rather than Nintendo, but I'm still counting it here. With all that said and done, we've finished the Smash Bros. Test. What are the results? Well, looking at the Smash Ultimate roster, Nintendo says there's about 81 characters. I tend to disagree with that number because the way they count them is so weird. Pokemon Trainer, for instance, counts as 3 separate characters. Pyra and Mythra, they count as 2, despite only having 1 slot. If you were to ask me how many characters there were, I'd say there are about 85 of them, but that number is going to be different for everybody, and luckily in my instance, the math ended up working about the same. So let's stick with 81 for now. Of those 81 total characters, about 62 had games on the Nintendo Switch. This leaves us with a percentage of, drumroll please, 76. Not bad, honestly, given how big Smash Ultimate's roster is. It also proves our point from earlier. 76% of characters have games on Switch, so there are a lot of first-party franchises. But I'm sure some of you guys are screaming at the top of your head, Aiden, who cares? Who cares about the Smash test? Who cares about the Switch having the most first-party franchises? Doesn't like every Nintendo system have first-party games? You've proven absolutely nothing. And well, that hasn't always been the case. Introducing the Nintendo Wii U, Nintendo's previous mainline console, that flopped. And there were a lot of reasons behind that failure. Number 1, the concept was bad. Number 2, the marketing was bad. But I think the biggest reason was simply because, say it with me now, there weren't that many first-party games. No mainline Kirby, no mainline Pokemon, no mainline Animal Crossing, and I could go down the list. In fact, to prove my point, I went ahead and did the Smash test on Smash Wii U's roster and found the results to be pretty abysmal. So, walk this through with me. So, Smash Wii U has a roster of 58 total characters. That's obviously less than Ultimate, but remember, it's the percentage that matters here. Of those 58 characters, about 24 of them ended up having games on the Wii U, which leaves us with a percentage of 41. Yikes, that's not even halfway. There are so few characters that have a game on the Wii U that most people probably wouldn't bother with it. At least, not with the Wii U. The 3DS, on the other hand, well, I remember that system having a ton of first-party games. I mean, your Pokemons, your Kirby's, ports of Yoshi. The 3DS had a really good life. In fact, I kind of wonder, did the 3DS fare any better? Let's go ahead and do the Smash Bros. Test with that too, because you know what? Aiden doesn't have enough work for today. Why don't we make him pull out another graph? Okay, let's go ahead and do this. I'm just now looking at the 3DS results here. So obviously, we have 58 characters total, same number as the Wii U roster, but it seems here that there were 44 characters represented. Okay, that's a lot. What's the percentage there? 75? 75% of characters on Smash 3DS have games on the 3DS? That's close to Ultimate numbers. Holy cow. Can you see why the 3DS did well? Why on earth would you go out there and buy a Wii U when the 3DS not only had more of your favorite Nintendo franchises, but typically better entries as well? Remember that split approach that we talked about in the beginning, where Nintendo focused on 2 consoles and split their time and resources? Well, we can see the results of that. The 3DS thrived and the Wii U failed. You had no reason to buy both of those when the 3DS had everything going for it and the Wii U had nothing going for it. Which brings me back to my point. The Switch gets the best of both worlds. You can buy one console and get an even higher percentage than both the Wii U and the 3DS because it has those first-party franchises. Nintendo has actually learned from their mistakes. They're giving series that haven't had opportunities in almost 10 plus years and saying, go ahead, WarioWare, here's a new game for you. Pikmin, here's a port of Pikmin 3 Deluxe. Advance Wars, sure, let's give them a remake as well. Nintendo is doing so stupidly well that they're going into the back catalogs of franchises and just saying, sure, why not? Go ahead and give them a shot. We're already making so much money anyway, and that is incredibly rare for that to happen for Nintendo. And as far as we know, it might never happen again. Once the Switch is over, Nintendo could easily go back to their two-console approach, either making another handheld or a home console. But for the time being, we are incredibly lucky to be in this position, and when it's all said and done, if we're going to ask why the Switch has sold so much, why it was a fan favorite, I'm going to put it on the first-party franchises being so stinking abundant. But that's it for me. If you liked the video, be sure to leave a like. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe. But above all else, I just hope you had a fun time. Let me know what you thought of this video and the Smash Brothers test down below in the comments. And also, let me know if I should do the other Smash Brothers games. I'd be interested to see what the results are. Anyway, you'll be seeing some videos pop up on your screen right about now, so you should give them a click, honestly. The top one looks pretty epic, but the bottom one is exuding some bottom energy, so, geez, tough call. I guess it's up for you to decide.